Well, Shabbat Shalom to all our family and friends. We are excited about what the Lord is doing. Um, you're watching Torah Talks with Tony and Bill. And again, we are excited. Again, I call him Papa B. So if you hear that expression, that's pretty much what we're saying. We have such a good time just talking among ourselves that I'm tempted to invite you in on just some of our conversations before the actual um, talk starts. But we want to kind of jump into this because we've been talking about this prophetic word. And I don't know if any of you remember, but when we first started this, one of the things we were talking about was our own process. You know, we were talking about the bridge, so to speak, and we'll eventually really explain that. But we were talking about our own process from where we were to where we are now and where we believe is taking us. And a part of that, we laid out some things that we actually do at the Biblical Lifestyle Center that we also did when we were regions. And some of those things, even in your home and even in Merville's, those things were very important. It was a significant part of our process and our transition, our transformation, if you would. One aspect of that we listed was the prophetic word and how important the prophetic word was to us and is to helping us transition. We have a prophetic word here that we've been talking about, and this is a perfect example of how Abba will download this stuff to us, and we'll engage, and we'll start walking it out step by step. And so I'm gonna read over this prophetic word, and there were some things that we talked about when we initially introduced this that I want to kind of bring back up and let you expound on this a little bit more. But the word is mass circumcision, is global ecclesiastical circumcision, is what the Lord showed me on October 28th. And here's how it reads. So I believe the church, if you would, have entered a time of mass circumcision, likened to that which took place during the time of Moses, after the mass deliverance of the Hebrew people from Egypt. The effect will yield a similar environment to that which surrounded the time of Israel's circumcision. Kingdom culture will emerge with a fiery zeal that will consume the circumcised. The covenant of Abba with his people will be felt or experienced throughout the world. The people of Yah will arise from the circumcision type movement with a passion for Yeshua that will energize a movement similar to the Jesus movement under sanctification. It will trigger more hatred from the world and false religious systems and bring about some of the first stages of persecution on a global, unprecedented stage. The body of Yeshua will thrive and unite to preach the gospel of the kingdom to the nations of the world. And that was the prophecy. I know it almost sounds like a bulletin, like we're reading the news bulletin, and maybe we are. But the church, in a prophetic sense, this is what I've added since then. The church, in a prophetic sense, have entered a time of a mass circumcision type movement. Abba is calling the body into alignment with the kingdom of Yeshua for such a time as this. And the reason that I say that is because I really believe that this is the time, this is the moment where we're seeing the body begin to undergo this circumcision type movement. And we're going to talk about some of the reasons why that's so important. It's so important right now that the body of Messiah embrace this circumcision type movement. And I think if we talk about that a little bit more, maybe we can explain and bring clarity to people that are going to be, listening and entering in. And really, what I found, Papa B, is that when Abba gives us a word, really people are already experiencing that word. It's not like a new thing. It confirms what's going on in them. It confirms what's going on in their lives. And I think this mass circumcision is already going on, but this will give definition or clarity to individuals, or maybe confirmation to the fact that this is happening right now. So I want to bring out some of the things that you talked about and let you expound on some of those things, because I think it's rich with revelation. That I see this pure revelation stream flowing into the communities and the hearts and the families of the people who really need this the most. And so I did a recap from our initial release, and these are some of the things that you talked about. Circumcision is about cutting covenant. Cutting covenant is not, and here's what you talk about. Cutting covenant is not about how one man can be blessed or even a people being blessed, but it's about how can heaven invade earth. That in and of itself is just a beautiful concept. What did you mean about that? What are we talking about when we talk about heaven invading earth and the circumcision being about that?
Well, the whole plan of God involves heaven invading earth, and he knew before the fall, before the garden, before the process, that the invasion of earth was his goal and the strategic objective. And so if we understand a little bit about the heart and the mentality of God, it is not about us as individuals, although we play a very important part. Just give you a strange example that may be not pleasant, but during your life you may have a pet. Okay, and you really do love the pet and you interact very beautifully with that pet, but your lifespan extends well beyond the lifespan of the dog, the cat, the whatever your animal may be in that process. So at first you're so involved and so caught up. It seems like it's just you and Fido or you and Tabby, as the case may be. And it's so real. And it doesn't mean you do not love the cat or the dog or whatever. You are very engaged with this as pet. But here's the thing, you're going to continue to exist. And your life will go on whenever Tabby or Fido or whoever is passed. And so we have, for instance, this week, just using this week as the example, this is the week of Hayy Sarah in Torah, the fifth parsha of Torah, the fifth week out from Simchat Torah. So the fifth week into our year of our sequence of rhythms and cycles that are going on. And so if we understand that God sits outside, he's like the one who has the pet, and we're the pet in a sense. I'm using a very strange analogy, but just so you get the picture of how this works. And he loves each one of us. He loves us like better than we love the pets, obviously, and with more passion. And it's very intricate and very unique to us. However, it's bigger than that as well. And the idea that what covenant is the idea of he will choose certain people who will release a certain thing. Like Abraham, for instance, an example, or Noah, or David, would release a certain thing that was a part of the kingdom invasion. Moshe was another one, Moses, another one. And you have people who are a part, who will channel, so to speak. And I use a kind of radio technology of a transceiver. That's a combination of a receiver for signals and a transmitter of signals, called a transceiver or a transponder in the airplane concept. The idea is you receive and then you transmit signals. And certain individuals that he chooses to be the introduction of that signal receiving, signal transmission process become the center points of his covenant. And Abraham was one of those. Abraham, Noah, David. We mentioned Shlomo, and also Moses, and those processes. So Yeshua, obviously, Yeshua. Well, we won't get into too much detail. You've asked me a specific question, and I've gone off in lots of different directions as I normally do. But what I want you to understand is that the Creator of the universe has a strategic plan, and it is always in operation, and it does not limit itself to one person or their desires or their wishes or their blessings. Those blessings, those things that he does in their life are all geared toward the great invasion and the great redemption of mankind as a species. That is why it's not about our individual salvation or about our individual walk or our individual plan of economy, our finances. Those things are important only to the extent they assist or push aside the plan of God for the redemption of mankind. It's twofold, actually. One is the redemption of mankind, and the other aspect of it is the restoration of his creation to its original, intended, Edenic state of fruitfulness, of beauty, and of harmonious interaction. This is the plan. So everything he does in form of covenant is designed to release signals into human beings and then have them become transmitters of those signals into the world to begin to have the world and the people in it begin one by one, situation by situation, geographical location by geographical location, to begin to come into alignment with that which is necessary for the invasion of heaven. I call it the downdraft. Heaven's downdraft. We become like the heat-seeking, the signal of the missile comes after the heat. Well, we're the heat. The covenant people become the heat, and the downdraft from heaven comes after the heat and follows, and then it spreads out. As it hits us, it doesn't just affect us. Everything's on the clock. Everything he gives us, every word he gives us, every energy, every passion he gives us, every excitement he gives us, every vision, word, prophetic thing that he gives us is on the clock. And now it's our job to see where it's supposed to be deposited. We were the receiver. Now we become the transmitter. Now, with that in mind, as far as how this covenant concept works, it is a part of his redemptive plan. And the words, the prophetic words, are now part of the covenant. And the idea is he is releasing energy, pulses of energy. And I mentioned how this prophecy, like all prophecies, is basically line upon line I used, or a precept upon precept in a way, but it's what it is pulses. There's pulses of energy. And in those pulses of energy are what the Hebrew calls devarim, which is power-packed energy words that have an immediate impact. It's like stones hitting the water. It's like water on a rain on a tin roof. When these words are spoken, these are specific words. And the words themselves have a power, and when you put them together in sentences, they have a power that's multiplied. When you add the sentences to the sentences to the sentences full of power-packed devarim, now you have something that could potentially alter the environment, change the atmosphere in the world. And so that's why these prophetic words that go with the covenant, that are part of the covenant, that are part of the grand redemptive plan and the restorative plan, that's why they have such a powerful pull on our hearts, and they change the environment.
That's a beautiful picture of heaven invading earth. And we have when Abba sets these covenants in place, when he establishes this downdraft and how that's going to take place, the words that he gives within that, the language that he gives us a picture of that invasion. So when we see in this covenant with Avram, we hear the language, right? And so we have a picture of what things are going to look like, how they're going to build, how they're going to develop, how they're going to impact people. One of the things that you brought out was, this is one of my favorites of the words that you brought out, was with the heaven invasion, through what surrendering, through what submission will this process be realized? Through what surrender? So when talk about circumcision in terms of surrendering and submission.
First of all, you mentioned earlier that it was I think you said something about it being the time, or we're at a place where it's already happening in the earth. Well, the reason, and why is that? The reason it's already happening, the reason it must happen, is because business as usual is no longer possible. I mean, there is such an animosity in the world. There's so much flesh absorption in the world. Everything you see on the news, every issue, political issue, every ideological issue, every denominational issue is based on one thing, comes down to one thing: flesh gone crazy. If you understand it's all about selfishness, what is the problem with abortion? The problem with abortion is not laws, and it's not Supreme Court cases. The problem with abortion is selfishness. It is a absorption with the flesh. I want to do what I want to do with no consequences. I want to do what I want to do because I want to do it when I want to do it, as I want to do it. I'm not just using abortion as one of the issues. All of the issues are the same thing. It boils down to the same thing. And we've reached a crisis point. The pot's boiling over. The animosity you see among the different ethnic groups. I mean, the different political groups, the ideological groups, the different nations that are in. All these different, everything's at a boiling point. And so business as usual. church as usual or synagogue as usual, religion as usual is not enough for a time like this. And the Father knows this. The one who watches over creation and watches over mankind understands that he needs to download some things, downdraft heaven in vocabulary, in sentences, in prophetic word, in vision that will begin to shift the atmosphere. At least to keep alive, if nothing else, to keep alive the vision and the dream of the redemption of mankind, which will remain alive. There will always be the witness. Now, what has happened again in the world today is that the witnesses are being called and they're hearing a tune. And they don't really know. There's just a sound out there, a sound of something, a rumbling in the background, a whisper of the voice of God. And it's like, okay, we know there is a burning bush coming. We've been rumbling, we've been looking, we've been seeking, we've been hungry, we've been kind of dissatisfied, unhappy, not angry, not ungrateful, just realizing we're not at our maximum point by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, we seem to be twirling in the other direction. And so now we have this process of hearing just a song, just a tune, just a sound, just a call, but we don't have definition for it. We don't have vocabulary for it. That's the purpose of this prophetic word. And many others, but this prophetic word at this particular stage. And so he's going to drop these bombs into our world, Devarim. And the first one that he drops in this particular word is circumcision. Now, immediately, your natural brain, if you've been in the church any period of time, your brain is resisting. He will offend the mind to reveal the heart. He chose the word circumcision because he knows what kind of negative reaction the Christian world is going to have. But it's a burning bush. I think I will turn aside and see what is happening with this bush. I need to be, and the burning bush drew Moshe in. And the circumcision word is so insulting to our mind and so taboo to our Christianity. He says, I am going to play games with them till they come and see the fire and see what I'm talking about. And so the circumcision is the first Devarim, the mass circumcision. And I love the fact that he uses the word mass because you understand it has many connotations in English. There is a context of many, a large number, and a mass circumcision, which we'll get to what circumcision really involves. And then there's a concept of mass being a growth, an abnormal growth, an improper growth, an unhealthy growth. And now we're talking about the other aspect, the dual entendre, the double entendre of the Holy One here, who's saying, okay, I'm talking about a mass circumcision, but with regard to individuals and with regard to cultures, I'm dealing with a mass. And we're going to cut away some of this mass that is causing the unhealth, the sickness, the disease. We're going to begin to cut away, and we're going to begin to do a little chemo, as the case may be. It will cause this thing to go back down to where it belongs or out completely. And we see what was designed to bring the invasion of heaven to earth, because there's a mass in the way. So.
When I hear the circumcision, we understand that the concept is itself, it's painful, right? The beauty of that is how Abba can love us into that place, even to the place of surrendering and submission. He loves us into this place. It's not a forceful thing, but love has force to it. And so he loves us into this place to where we surrender. We surrender to the downdraft. We understand the purpose of this covenant. We understand the purpose of this circumcision, and our hearts are drawn to surrender to Abba in this process. But we also, and this is bringing me to my next deal. But there is a part of that where when you think about where the church has been over the last decade or so, and how there's been this sense of entanglement. We've been, Paul says to Timothy, no man that warreth entangleth themselves in the affairs of this. So there is a sense of entanglement. that has taken place over time, and it happens. Teshuvah this year, I heard as we talked in Teshuvah, one of the nights that I came out, you were talking about the time of turning, but you mentioned it also means a time of taking back control. Take back control of your thoughts. Take back control of your words and of your life and of your destiny. And so there is a time that, Teshuvah help us to get to that place. And then after that season, we hit circumcision, right? Which tells me that Teshuvah is necessary for circumcision. It is a part of the process. And so when you talked about last week, circumcision is a form of self-denial. Here's the beauty. It's self-denial for a greater purpose. We will begin releasing the energy of heaven because we are surrendered to its power and beauty. Those are words. And so the reason that I wanted Papa be here and I wanted to start the Torah Talks is because these are the type of conversations, and I'm saying this because I want you to understand that you too should be in conversation with the people of Abba, talking about the things of God, talking about kingdom things, because this is also how we transition. This is also how we begin to transform, is through our conversations. I never will forget when we did the prayer walks at Texas A&M and downtown Texarkana. We would talk, right? We would talk about those events. We would talk about the community. We would talk about the things that we would be praying about. And then we would organically just move into prayer and start covering those communities. And if you look at Texas A&M and some of the challenges that are there now with the youth, you understand why Abba brought us to those places of prayer. Well, this circumcision that's taking place, I feel that we will actually be drawn to it. It's taking place, and though it's naturally a painful thing or deal, we're flowing into it, and love has brought us here. Love has brought us to this place of circumcision, but it has brought us to this self-denial. And what a beautiful concept is that we move into self-denial because we love him. This is what we talked about earlier, love responding to love. We love him because he first loved us. And this is a part of his love, is getting us to this place. Why do you think in this time, self-denial is going to be such an important part of this process?
Well, self-denial is an important part of this process because self is the ultimate issue, is the ultimate problem. Everything, as I mentioned earlier, every issue in the world, every religious, every denominational, every political, every ideological issue, all relates back to this issue of self. Yeshua put it, this way, unless you will deny yourself. And this is the whole issue of denying self. And why do we deny self? It says, what would I want to deny myself for? Because there's something much better than us. And I think that's when you say we're drawn into it by love. We're not compelled, we're not forced, but we're drawn into it by love. The idea is our Creator created us for something better than selfishness, for a more beautiful life, a more fruitful life, a more wonderful life. And if we understand circumcision from the agricultural context in which it comes in, orla is the word we usually call foreskin, but foreskin really comes from the agricultural realm, and it is the fact that a tree by itself or a bush by itself will start growing wildly. I mean, it'll have branches that cover up other branches. If you have a fruit tree, you'll get so many little suckers off the bottom and other types of life, signs of life that contradict the ultimate purpose for the tree, which is to produce as much fruit as possible. And so what does the gardener do? What does the horticulturalist do? The wise gardener goes in and he says, this branch needs to be pruned. This branch needs to be trimmed. Because we need to make sure the light gets where it needs to be, that the juices of the inside, the xylem and the phloem of the tree go through without being interrupted by going off in different direction, that direction. and it's accessible for other people to reach. You can't have to fight through 14 different limbs to get to the fruit. And then the fruit becomes fuller and richer and more beautiful. So orla, the idea of trimming, pruning. And that's what really the circumcision in the flesh is. It's a pruning of excess flesh. Well, who's got some excess flesh? Okay, and where is that excess flesh? Now we can talk about the pruning of the male sexual organ or reproductive organ, and that's obviously there. And the whole issue, one of the things is self. Two things that are problematic in our world. There's more than that, but there's two main ones that get all the attention. And one is self in general, and the other is particular self in regard to sexuality, ideas of my personal sexuality. And so that's why I think he uses the term circumcision to tell you, you've got a sexual problem. Society in America, society in the world, you have gone absolutely berserk over this issue. And you have gone over it from the standpoint of sensuality, what can make you feel good, what you think you want, what you think you like. You have lost the purpose. This is not a fruit tree anymore. This is some perverse briar vine that you have totally gone out of control. So, yes, the issue of the human male reproductive organ, surrendering, submitting back, self-denial of the fact that I am a sexual being, to the point of what is your design for me? What did you put this capacity in me for? So that's the first step of this idea, physical circumcision, brit milah, as the case may be. But the circumcision goes beyond to every area of excess flesh. Have you ever been to a really good dermatologist? Now, I'm 64 years old, and as you can probably tell, my complexion is very fair. And so a good dermatologist loves to see me coming, because I have been out in the sun too long. And so a good dermatologist sees me coming into the room and says, oh boy, what am I going to find? And so they begin to inspect, and they got this spot here and that spot there and this spot there, and they're looking to see if it's diseased or if it's particularly cancerous or precancerous or whatever. And they just start zapping this and zapping that and whatever. Well, that's because we have excess flesh. We have been involved and affected by our environment in such a way that flesh has grown, and it's toxic and it's negative and it's destructive. And therefore, he's the great dermatologist. I mean, he's saying you need a circumcision of your flesh. You need to inspect you. You need me to come and begin to cut away the areas of flesh. So those areas of the flesh, I'm sure maybe next time we'll talk more about what those areas of the flesh, the most likely areas you're going to find excess flesh in you. It's not just the male reproductive organ. Then the whole issue of sexuality, it's all aspects of our character, our nature, and our physical body, and how we relate to the world around us. He says you can't go on like you have been. This cannot continue to keep going down and down and get more and more selfish, more and more self-obsessed, more and more narcissistic, more and more toxic, more and more perverse. Somebody has to hear and has to begin to respond, receive the transmission, and then transmit the transmission in such a way that it draws people in. Not for what you have to give away, though you will. It's because of what you will receive. The fruitfulness and the plan of God for your life. That's what's worth pursuing.
Yeah. We're out of time, but when we come back, we want to talk more about the circumcision. We want to get into a little bit more about identifying those areas of flesh so that we can really surrender and submit to God's will in circumcision. We want to see what he has for us, and we want to experience that to the degree he wants us to experience it. Also, when we come back, hopefully we'll be able to talk about the prophetic word between the two parshas in two situations, in Bereshit and also in Shemot and Genesis and Exodus. You'll see this prophetic word nestled between two important scenarios, and we want you to get that, because there is beauty in that. There is prophetic word in that, and I want you to get it. Well, that's all we have time for. Listen, pray for our country and pray for those who are affected by the decisions we make in this country. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.